Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, DwyerVIP.com. Here with just a sports editorial. This is not a prediction video. Earlier I made a video on baseball and its hypocrisy concerning steroids. And in that video, I pointed out that Hank Aaron himself had admitted to taking amphetamines once to help improve his performance, and that it wasn't for him. He then decided not to pursue it. The reason why it's an important story is that right now it seems like there's a group of writers, the voters for baseball's Hall of Fame, who apparently have taken a de facto hardline that if you ever use steroids at any time in your baseball career, that usage disqualifies you from Hall of Fame consideration. The point is simply, how can you have a Hall of Fame where even some of the very best have admitted taking amphetamines at least once during their baseball careers, and where we know that some of these guys were habitual amphetamine users? Some of these guys used other substances, right? Alcohol. And keep in mind, alcohol's loaded, because in the early part of the 20th century, alcohol was a banned drug. It was unconstitutional. And yet we know that there were alcoholics playing baseball. We know that Grover Alexander, for example, apparently was using alcohol while it was banned. And of course, Grover Alexander is in the Hall of Fame. So it seems to be an awfully unfair after-the-fact standard for the Hall of Fame, after years of admitting guys who used drugs, some illegal. It seems preposterous for the Hall to now adopt a different standard. That's what they're doing, without, of course, expelling those, no matter how great, who have admitted to things like amphetamine usage. So, readers in the comment section wanted to know where I got the idea that Hank Aaron used amphetamines, right? One wrote, hey, where's that article? Well, I got it from a pretty good source. Hank Aaron's own autobiography, right? And I Had a Hammer, the Hank Aaron story. It's Hank Aaron who reveals that he once used amphetamines, right? And so let me just say that what baseball needs to do is to explain how it reconciles having a hall with players who used substances to get an advantage, right, historically, while at the same time trying to exclude players today who use substances to get an advantage. The word that comes to mind to me is inconsistency. Let me also say, too, that once you realize that many of the records in baseball may have been enhanced by nicotine and amphetamines, then the argument that somehow these records lose integrity because guys are taking other drugs to challenge these records falls apart. Okay, so again, Hank Aaron's autobiography, I Had a Hammer, the Hank Aaron story. I encourage everyone to take a look at the section in which Hank Aaron admits to once using amphetamines. Let's shift sports. Let's talk football, right? Sometimes the hard truth, and the truth is hard, takes years to come out. Right now in the public narrative, we are in that stage where people are concerned that the owners lied to the players, allegedly, about the dangers of the sport. In other words, in the news are stories of players with head trauma. I believe the term is CTE, right? They had chronic head trauma, and because of that chronic head trauma, they developed brain injuries. And what we have now are guys like Dave Dwyer shooting themselves in the chest, right? We're finding out that even some young guys, Chris Henry, showed signs of chronic traumatic brain injury, right? And of course, Junior Seau now has been found to have had brain damage, even though he was a young man in his 40s, and Seau killed himself just like Dave Dwyer did. I have no doubt that these players are going through a lot of medical problems. I have no doubt about that. And I know right now it's very unpopular to talk about the other side of the story. But there is another side of the story, right? And because we're here on YouTube, keeping it real, let's try to go after that other side of the story. RG3, the very talented Redskin quarterback who in his rookie year had a quarterback rating over 100 and made the Pro Bowl. Right? RG3 tore his ACL while he was in college. He gets a starting job with the Redskins, and the Redskins make the playoffs. So it's the biggest game of his pro career, right? His team's playoff game, his first playoff game, right? Now, he had a knee that was banged up. He told his coach he was ready to go, even at halftime of the game. Mike Shanahan comes over to him, wants to find out if he can continue in the game, and RG3 says, yes, I can continue. Now keep in mind, his knee problems were ongoing at the end of the season. There's even a game where RG3 comes off of the field after a hard play in which his knee was tested, and he dodges the doctor on the sideline. Right? RG3 himself in interviews, when asked about why he kept playing, says in essence, I'm the quarterback of this team. I give my team the best chance to win. I need to be out there. Right? Now, this is a guy who has had prior knee problems, who knows that his knee isn't 100%. And he's telling the coaching staff to put him in the game. That's the culture in football. Warriors want to be warriors, right? Players get dinged up, but it's a big game. It's a big moment in a big game. They don't want to come off the field. Right? Ronnie Lott once got part of a finger amputated because he was told that if he had finger surgery, he was going to miss a series of games. Brian Urlacher, in an interview, admitted that sometimes he's dinged up, but he doesn't want to report it because he doesn't want to get off the field. He doesn't want someone reaching the conclusion that he had a concussion, because then NFL protocol would have to be followed, and he might have to miss some playing time. Ricky Waters, a back who quite frankly should be in football's Hall of Fame. Look up the numbers. More than 10,000 career rushing yards. He knows a lot about the game. A guy like Ricky Waters, in interviews, has said that he believes that he had dozens of concussions right? I think it's a myth that these players have a handful of concussions or 4 and 5 concussions. When you're going up against guys who weigh 250 to 350, and they're fast athletes, and they're running into each other all the time, don't you think that these players aren't getting buzzed all the time? Don't you think that there aren't players out there who, many times in their career, have been on the field and have been so buzzed that they don't even know what quarter it is? They just know that they're in a battle, right? Bill Romanowski, another player who has come out and who has said that he believes that he got several concussions every season, right? Well, as we look at the Junior Seau story, and as we hear about these player lawsuits, about the players not knowing the risk of head trauma, right? The players not knowing that the sport might actually be physically dangerous, right? Consider the other part of the coin. Players like RG3, who know they have injuries, and who are telling the team, in essence the league, I can play. The Junior Seau case is fascinating, because understand Junior Seau is not known to have had a documented concussion, right? Junior Seau apparently was one of these tough guys who enjoyed being a tough guy. Let's get really under the hood here for a second, because people know I do boxing videos. Isn't the danger also part of the appeal of the sport for players? Aren't there players attracted to the sport, just like in boxing, because of the excitement of the danger? Aren't there players who like the idea of still being able to play while injured for their teams, right? Aren't there players who are actually hiding concussions from the team because they themselves view it as heroic to continue to play on with the concussion, right? The RG3 story needs to be linked in the public consciousness with the Junior Seau story, right? Is there anyone watching this video who does not believe that there were times when Junior Seau was on the field and knew he was buzzed, knew he had been hit hard in the head, knew he was hurt, knew he was injured, and voluntarily chose not to tell his teammates, not to tell team officials, because he wanted to play? Right now, I'm pro player. I believe the risk in boxing, the risk in football, it's so great that whenever there is a labor dispute, I usually side with the players. Quite frankly, I think unions can help and unions can hurt. It's clear to me that because of CBAs, a lot of players are getting paid far less than they would have been paid if they were able to negotiate on the free market, right? And I believe, quite frankly, players are getting hurt because players are not able to negotiate openly, because you and I know teams would make concessions to get star players, right, if they had to negotiate with those players individually. And some players, Brett Favre back in the day, who hated training camp, would be able to literally negotiate individually to avoid training camp and to avoid the number of hits that they're taking, right? It's because we, not to get too political, but it's really because we truncate the free market. And we have things like collective bargaining agreements where the players have no say on when they report, that they often have to fit into some regime that doesn't allow them to complain about certain aspects of the sport. But understand there's the other side, right? We've all seen the football player and the boxer who refuses to retire despite obvious health risks, right? We've all seen the player and the boxer who, when asked if they're okay, when asked if they can continue, whether it's by, in boxing, a referee, the boxer's own corner, or in football, the head coach, will tell that official, yes, I can continue. We've all seen that. My point to you is, as we look at this brain injury situation, and it's significant in the NFL, let's also ask ourselves how much of this risk was voluntarily assumed by the players. Let me know what you think. Let me say, I think it's really important that we discuss this online outside of the corporate media, right? Because understand the way the whole market is set up, right? Professional sports is a great opportunity for corporate advertisers to try to sell their products to the public, right? The whole system is set up to sell you sneakers and toasters, right? No one wants to rock the boat. If there's a commentator on network TV who's getting money from advertisers, that commentator has a financial incentive, right? If he's employed by ESPN or HBO, and if they make a huge portion of their money from advertisers, right? That commentator has a huge incentive not to bite the hand that feeds him. Here online, even though, yes, even my videos are ad-supported, we don't have the same degree of structural pressure. We don't have to fit into the normal sports dialogue. So let me hear from you. Your comments are unfiltered. Anything you leave in the comment section to this video will be seen in most of the places where this video is seen, depending on how the person embedding the video embeds it, right? There isn't the same degree of censorship that there is when you're watching a television show that's governed by the FCC, or when you're watching a television show that's financed by advertisers who can pull the funding at any time if people on the show criticize their products, right? So let me hear from you about this ongoing issue. There's no question in my mind that the owners engaged in propaganda that, football doesn't lead to concussions, and the football concussions don't lead to long-term brain injury. There's no question in my mind about that. Also, I know the NFL historically has challenged players who have come in and who have said, I'm disabled, because I played football, I suffered brain injuries. There's no question about that. My question to you is whether or not you, the public, admits that there are players like RG3, like Brian Urlacher, like Bill Romanowski, who willingly play with injuries, who will hide their injuries from the team in order to play, and who might actually view it as heroic, might actually view it as spiritually fulfilling to be able to go out on the field in an athletic competition with an injury and still deliver, knowing the risk involved in playing. Let me hear from you. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com. DwyerVIP.com, on Roku, Dwyer Boxing, private channel, Dwyer Sports Information, private channel. Thanks for watching.